Good morning and welcome to Tuesdays with the Pilgrim. Today we continue our journey with Christiana and the boys as they head out to meet Christian in the Celestial City. We begin our reading today in chapter 18, part 10. The neighbors oppose Christiana's decision. When they were about ready to leave, two women who were Christiana's neighbors came and knocked on her door. She said as before, "If you come in God's name, come in." The neighbors were stunned, for they weren't used to hearing Christiana use this kind of language. They came in, however, and found her preparing to leave her home. They said, "Neighbor, please tell us, what is the meaning of this?" Christiana directed her answer to the eldest, whose name was Mrs. Timorous. "I'm preparing for a journey." Mrs. Timorous was the daughter of the man who, on Hill Difficulty, had advised Christian to go back for fear of the lions. She asked Christiana, "What journey are you preparing for, may I ask?" Christiana answered, "I am going after my good husband," and then she began to weep. "I should hope not," exclaimed Mrs. Timorous. "My good neighbor, your children need you. Don't throw yourself away." "This isn't the case, for my children are going with me," said Christiana. "Not one of them is willing to stay behind." "Oh, I wonder in my heart who or what could have driven you to this state of mind," exclaimed Mrs. Timorous. "Oh, my good neighbor, if you knew as much as I do, I have no doubt you would go with me." "Please tell me," said Mrs. Timorous, "what new knowledge have you received that is driving you away from your friends and causing you to go who knows where?" Christiana replied, "I have been terribly afflicted since my husband left me, but most especially since he passed over the river. What troubles me most is the memory of my rude behavior towards him when he was in distress. Besides this, I am presently in the same state he was then, and nothing will satisfy me except going on this pilgrimage. Last night I dreamed that I saw him. Oh, if only my soul could be with him! I saw him living in the presence of the king of that country. He sits and eats with him at his table. He has become a companion of immortals. He has been given a house to dwell in, to which the grandest palace on earth, if compared, would look like a garbage dump. The prince of the place has also sent for me with a promise to receive me if I will come to him. His messenger was just here and brought a letter inviting me to come." At that she pulled out the letter and read it to them and asked, "Now, what do you have to say about all this?" "Oh, the insanity that possessed both your husband and now you to drive you into such difficulties!" exclaimed Mrs. Timorous. "I am sure that you have heard all that your husband met with on his journey, even from the first step he took on his way. Our neighbor, Obstinate, can attest to this, for he went along with him, and so did Pliable, but they, like true wise men, were afraid to go any further. We also heard about how Christian met the lions, Apollyon and the shadow of death, and many other things. And don't forget the danger he met at Vanity Fair, for if he, though a man, was so hard-pressed, what can you do, being just a frail woman? You need to consider also that these four sweet children are your flesh and blood. Therefore, even though you would be so rash as to throw your own life away, for the sake of your children you should stay home." But Christiana answered her, "Don't tempt me, my neighbor. I have been shown what there is to gain, and I would be the greatest fool if I did not take heart and seize this opportunity. Your telling me of all the troubles that I am likely to encounter on the way cannot dissuade me. They will only convince me that I am in the right. The bitter must come before the sweet, and that will serve only to make the sweet sweeter. Therefore, since you did not come to my house in God's name, as I said, please leave me alone and don't trouble me any further." Chapter 18, Part 11. Mercy's Decision. Then Mrs. Timorous began to insult her and said to her friend, "Come, neighbor Mercy, let us leave her to herself, since she scorns our counsel and company." But Mercy stood still. She couldn't so readily comply with her neighbor for two reasons. First, her heart was filled with compassion for Christiana, and she thought to herself that she ought to go with her a little way to help her. Second, her heart yearned for her own soul, for Christiana's words had made an impression on her. So she told herself, I need to talk further with Christiana. If I find truth and life in her words, I will go with her with all my heart. So Mercy said to Mrs. Timorous, Neighbor, it is true that I came with you to see Christiana this morning, but as we both can see, she is saying her last farewell to her country, and I want to walk with her a little way on this bright, sunshiny day. Perhaps I can help her along the way. She still did not tell her the second reason, however, but kept that to herself. Well, I see you have a mind to carry on like a fool, too, said Mrs. Timorous. But listen to wisdom and take heed before it's too late. While we're out of danger, we're out, but when we're in, we're in. Chapter 18, Part 12. Mrs. Timorous and her neighbors. So Mrs. Timorous returned to her house, and Christiana resolved to begin her journey as soon as possible. When Mrs. Timorous got home, however, she sent for some of her neighbors, namely Mrs. Bat's Eyes and Mrs. Inconsiderate, Mrs. Lightmind and Mrs. Know-Nothing. When they got to her house, she began to tell them all about Christiana and the journey she was planning. Neighbors, she said, I have very little to do this morning, so I went to visit Christiana. When I got to her house, I knocked on her door as was customary, and she answered, If you come in God's name, come in. So I went right in, thinking all was well, but I found her preparing to leave town with her children. I asked her what was the meaning of this, and she told me, in short, that she had now decided to go on a pilgrimage just as her husband had done. She also told me about a dream she had about how the king of the country where her husband was had sent her an invitation to come there. Then Mrs. Know-Nothing said, What? Do you think she'll really go? Yes, replied Mrs. Timorous, I believe that she will go come what may. I earnestly tried to persuade her to stay home by telling her about the trouble she will likely face on the way, but she acted as if these were reasons to go. She said that the bitter must come before the sweet, and that this makes the sweet seem even sweeter. Oh, this blind, foolish woman, said Mrs. Bat's Eyes. Won't she be warned by her husband's afflictions? In my opinion, if he were here and had it to do all over again, he would rest content and never run into so many hazards again. It just makes no sense. Mrs. Inconsiderate also gave her opinion. Away with these starry-eyed fools from our town. I say good riddance to her. If she were to stay here and hold such thoughts in her mind, who could live peacefully around her? She would either be moping around, depressed and unneighborly, or rambling on about these matters in a way that no wise person could tolerate. So in my opinion, I will never regret her departure. Let her go, and let someone better move in. The world has never been a good place since these whimsical fools began to dwell in it. Mrs. Light-Minded added, Come on, let's forget about this discussion. I was at Madame Wanton's house yesterday, where we were as happy as larks. For who do you think was there? Besides me, were Mrs. Love-the-Flesh, Mr. Lechery, Mrs. Filth, and 3 or 4 others. We enjoyed music and dancing and everything else that was available for having a good time. Madame Wanton is an admirable and well-bred lady, and Mr. Lechery is quite a handsome man. And we'll end there for this week, and next week we'll pick up with Chapter 19, Part 1, Their Pilgrimage Begins. Until then, take care, stay safe, and God bless.